meditate a bit till everyone comes. Welcome. Wonderful to see you. Um, Thank you for all of your meditations for Matt and for Jordan. It was really wonderful to be able to reach out to all of you. So one of the one of the things that has been coming to me lately is the need for us to be working for the world. So just a reminder, world work around the world is 7 and 12. So 7 a.m., noon, 7 p.m., midnight. If you can do those, it's an easy reminder. But keep in mind that in each time zone, if people are doing that time, then each hour there is a group meditating. So you can join at any time. It's usually the top of the hour. You can set something up to remember, alarm on your phone or on your computer. And so my appreciation for that ahead of time. Um, I've reconnected with author Dolores Cannon in addition to Edgar Cayce. And the two of them were not channelers. They were able to access the records of the past for individuals and through them for the world. So it's very interesting to read what they've uncovered through their work. Obviously, it was time for us to all learn this. And it very much corresponds to my own experiences very early in actually before the Infinite Way. So I did regressions accidentally. Actually, I didn't realize what it was or how it worked, but I was able to access some of my past and not just the past lives, but the in between. And that's where the confidence for Joel's teaching came from, knowing that what he's saying is true on a very visceral level, not just believing it, but the knowingness of it. And so I would invite you to look into that if you're at all interested in the history of the world, what happens after we die, why you're here on Earth, what your purpose is. These answers come from lots of short videos, and I recommend and think that they're very valuable. So that said, Let's just take a moment together to pray for the world, knowing that God's presence is appearing everywhere. God is plants, animals, people, minerals, cells, winds, rains, oceans. And that presence is underscored with our acknowledgement and blessing. The goal being simply to lift the consciousness of everyone, knowing that more and more are being able to join the circle of Christhood, that brotherhood of souls in tune with the infinite. We're all part of the infinite, but not everyone is in tune. And I was listening to something this week, and they were saying how it was described as a radio station. The program is constantly on, but only when you tune in do you see it. And so we should be, our attitude of God connectedness should very much be like that radio or TV is tuned in all the time as background. We always have the radio on. The metaphor for God, listening, attentive. Thank you. Okay, so let's continue on my book on the San Francisco lecture series, page 70. Divine consciousness, universal consciousness, that which we call God, which is individual consciousness, yours and mine, that is the law of our individual being. Through that, we individually are given dominion over the things of the sea and the earth and the air and the sky. And when you either knowingly or unknowingly permit something in the realm of effect to be a law unto you, you've become in bondage to it. For the world at large, there is an excuse. The world at large has never been told that we are the law unto our own being. The world has been taught about God somewhere off in the skies or a God on a cross, and given the teaching that we are worms of the dust, or that we are mortals, or that we are humans, and that we are subject to all of these different influences. Since they accept that teaching, not knowing any better, we cannot blame the people of the world when they come under the bondage of these material and theological beliefs. But for you and for me, there's no excuse. We've been taught in metaphysics, taught our true identity. We've had called to our attention those passages of scripture which ordinarily are never brought to the attention of the Christians or the Jewish world. We've been taught, for instance, that we are joint heirs with Christ. We've been taught all that I have is thine. And we've been taught that this applies to you and to me today. not merely to some Jesus Christ of some 2,000 years ago. It applies literally and unconditionally to you and to me individually. Therefore, for us, there's no excuse when we knowingly bring ourselves under bondage to these man-made beliefs and so-called laws. There are still many forms of bondage that we come under through our ignorance because we haven't really progressed far in this study and practice of truth. We are really only at the first outer rim of the subject. We are far from being at the center. So there probably is plenty that we do not understand. And because of that lack of understanding, we are in bondage. But there is so much that we do know and that we do not consciously practice, that at this point, it becomes necessary to remind ourselves, how many superstitions am I accepting? How many phases of bondage am I accepting? Even with the little understanding that I have, I should be freer. Freedom begins when we recognize that God is divine consciousness, that God is divine mind, and that his consciousness is yours and mine. From that moment on, I and the Father are not only one, but consciously one. It was always true of everyone that I and the Father are one, but not having the conscious awareness of it made it impossible for the manifestation to be made. In other words, our freedom comes not because of our relationship with God. It comes because of our conscious awareness of that relationship. Our freedom comes not because of our relationship with God. It comes because of our conscious awareness of that relationship. Never forget this. I and the Father are one. That is the relationship between God and every individual. But that will not stop us from building jails and hospitals and insane asylums. We only benefit from our relationship with God in proportion to our conscious awareness of it. You remember our favorite passages. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Stayed. Pray without ceasing. Those are the passages that must be brought to our remembrance over and over again, so that we remind ourselves of our true identity. Because in the conscious awareness of the presence of God, in the conscious awareness of our true identity, lies our freedom. The particular idea has evolved that nothing external to our consciousness has power over me. Well, of course, in reality, there is nothing external to consciousness. What was meant is that nothing that exists as an effect or as a concept of an effect has power over me. Now, even what you see up here as me is not the reality. You are seeing the universal concept of the individualization of God. But even that concept which you are seeing up here has no jurisdiction over you. No government, not even for good. Nor has any effect of God any power over you or dominion over you. In other words, your consciousness itself is the power unto all formation, and through that knowledge, it becomes the power over every concept of every formation. Take your lungs. They are not divine realities. God did not create them. They are universal concepts, however, of some divine idea, some divine faculty or activity. Then in the understanding that the infinite divine consciousness, which I am, is the law unto its spiritual creation, we are brought to dominion over even the concept called a heart or a stomach. That is how a metaphysical treatment operates. Metaphysical treatment never touches the concept called foot or leg or stomach or head. Metaphysical treatment is the realization of God, divine consciousness, being the substance, law, and cause of all spiritual creation. The knowledge of that truth gives us dominion over our concept of that spiritual creation. That sounds deep, doesn't it? It isn't as deep as it sounds. It is only because the subject isn't an easy one. God is spirit. Therefore, the universe is spiritual. Now you haven't seen that universe of God except in your moments of illumination, of spiritual illumination. You may then, through your developed spiritual consciousness, behold it. But in the ordinary walks of life, you never come into contact with either God or God's creation. You come in contact with the world's concept, the race concept of that creation. And your knowledge of the truth of God as infinite body, infinite being, the one power, and as all creation as subject to that power, gives you dominion over this world of concept. Your knowledge of the truth of God as infinite being, the one power, and as all creation as subject to that power, gives you dominion over this world of concept. That, of course, is a subject that has to be carried out more and more and more until we come into the realization of what it means and why it means it, and unto the ability then to demonstrate it. Now, when we take the first step towards spiritual freedom, we do it by consciously realizing that nothing appearing as an external world is a power over me. Whether that is a heart, whether it is a brain, or whether it is a force or a bomb or a bit of food or a germ. Our first sense of freedom must come when we accept consciously the truth that nothing out there here has power over us, except in proportion as we give it power. It of itself has not the power. We, by fearing it, can give it power. Oh yes, there might be a chair back there, with a white sheet thrown over it, and we may assume it to be a ghost and sit here and tremble all night and die of heart failure. But not because it had any power over us, only because we, in our perceiving it as it is, through believing that something external could have power, would give it the power to govern us and control us. You say, well, that's true of the chair with the sheet over it. But suppose it were a ghost. Well, the same thing would apply. Even if there is such a thing in existence as a ghost, it can exist only as the effect of consciousness. Therefore, it cannot be a power over the consciousness that must have produced it. It can exist only as the effect of consciousness. Therefore, it cannot be a power over the consciousness that must have produced it. We ourselves impart power to these effects of the world or effects of God's creation, and only in that degree do they have power over us. We've spoken of this before too, that our bondage to dollars comes only from the belief that we accept dollars as power. Purchasing power, actually, the power is in our own being. The dollars are given to us as a medium of exchange. the same as streetcar transfers are. The dollars have a greater value, but they are the same thing. They are forms of exchange, but they can have as many, but we can have as many of them as we can open our consciousness to. We must develop our freedom from the belief that the power of supply is in the dollars. Transfer that power to your own consciousness and say, no, the power of supply is within my own consciousness, governing this world of dollars. Then automatically you break the bondage, which really is a fear. You know the old scriptural words, the love of money is the root of all evil. The love of money or the hate of it or the fear of it is the bondage, the evil. It isn't the money itself. Money is a glorious thing. It is just as glorious as fine clothing or fine transportation. Money is a beautiful thing, but the moment we give it power over us, dominion over us, we've lost our own spiritual freedom. We could go on with this, for days and days and days. We very often are afraid of dictatorships in the world government, and we are afraid of the law on this or that, instead of realizing that we ourselves constitute all the law there is. The law abides within our own consciousness. When we know that we can be free, regardless of what form of government may appear, it doesn't really make any difference. There are men in slave countries that are free. There are men, those who have been able to accept within their own consciousness their freedom. They're free. Bondage is in our own superstition, our own belief, our own acceptance of a presence and power apart from God. The very moment you can accept in your consciousness, in your thoughts, the idea that God created you free, that God gave you dominion, in that moment the world knows your freedom and makes way for you. Do you know that you yourself control the world's reaction to you? You do so by your own estimate of your own being. Where is bondage? In one's own belief. That is where all bondage is. If you are entertaining a sense of bondage to person, place, thing, circumstance, or condition, it is in your own being. It is your own consciousness, and that is where you have to meet it. You have to learn that God is infinite mind, infinite intelligence, infinite consciousness, and that is your mind. Therefore, you are equal before God. You are equal before God and man. Bondage is in our own superstition, our own belief, our own acceptance of a presence and a power apart from God. The very moment you can accept in your consciousness, in your thoughts, the idea that God created you free, that God gave you dominion, in that moment the world knows your freedom and makes way for you. If you are entertaining a sense of bondage to a person, a place, a thing, a circumstance, or a condition, it is in your own being. It is your own consciousness. And that is where you have to meet it. You have to learn that God is infinite mind, infinite intelligence, infinite consciousness. And that is your mind. Therefore, you are equal before God. You are equal before God and man. Christ isn't Jew and Christ isn't Christian. Christ is the divine spirit of individual being and is the spirit of God in man. Everybody has it, regardless of race, religion, color, or creed. But unless you and I consciously accept it, we won't project it. If we do not consciously accept it, the fellow out there can't feel it. Out there, you feel my state of consciousness, and I feel your state of consciousness. You can't miss it. Every time you go to a restaurant and you're waited on by a waiter or a waitress, you feel the state of consciousness of that individual. You know it for what it is. And when you go into a business place, you know the same thing. It's up to you to develop your freedom, the degree of your freedom. Now, having agreed that nothing in the external world has power over us for good or for evil, we've brought our attention and thought back to that which is within our own being, reality. We have brought our thoughts back now to where we can turn within in meditation or communion and there find the Father within. Have you ever thought how many times you've read in the New Testament about the Father within? Have you ever thought about how many times you've read in Paul, I live, yet not I? Christ liveth in me? And have you ever thought how seldom you've sat down with yourself and said, I must get acquainted with this Father within me and find what Paul was talking about? No, most of us never find the Father within, the Christ. Those who do usually are on the inspirational or metaphysical path. But even there, it really is sad how few ever decide to investigate and find out if what Jesus said is true. The Father is within you. Here again, it is through conscious effort that you contact the Christ or Father within your own being. Until you do, you cannot gain spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom does not come from any statements of truth that you know. Spiritual freedom does not come through anything you've learned with your intellect. All you can learn through the mind and all you can learn through the mind and the intellect is about spiritual freedom. But spiritual freedom itself is attained when you've touched the Christ of your own being and have actually felt the divine presence within you. That's why I tell you again, we are dealing with a very, very deep subject. We are dealing with the reality, with that which is invisible to our outer senses and which therefore must be met within our own consciousness. And each one has to do that for himself. There's no easy road. There's no royal way. We have helped on the way in the form of spiritual literature, teachings, and teachers, and they constitute the way. But the way, you know, is a path, and a path always goes someplace. And Jesus said, I am the way. The Christ is the way. Christ is the path to lead you to the kingdom of God. You know, the leaning on Jesus was so tremendous that he told them very frankly that if I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. It's a marvelous thing to have practitioners and teachers, but it is a terrible thing to have them for too long. It's a wonderful thing to be able to lean on somebody in this spiritual path for help, for guidance, for healing. But it's a terrible thing to keep on leaning and leaning and leaning and never finding your own spiritual freedom. In certain religious teachings, there are masters, just as in the ancient days, Jesus was a master. But too often people get the idea that these masters are to take over your mind and your life and govern it and run it for you. And that's very sad business. I'm sorry, very bad business. A master is one to whom you can go, one who's achieved some measure of spiritual freedom, which means some measure of non-attachment to the things and thoughts of the world. Through his help and cooperation, you can be lifted up into a state of spiritual consciousness, spiritual discernment, where you yourself realize the master of your own consciousness. The master is not a man. The master is a state of unfolded and developed consciousness. A man like Jesus had this master consciousness probably to the greatest degree ever known. But look what use people are making of it. They go around and they use the name Jesus Christ and they repeat it as if the name itself had a virtue. And they say that the reason the name has virtue is because it was the name of the Master of Galilee and therefore was embedded with his great spirit. You know, it would be sad if that were true, but it isn't true. I doubt if there was any Hebrew in Galilee who had a Greek name. Jesus the Christ are both Greek names. Christ isn't even a name. It is the Savior, divine consciousness. And Jesus wasn't Jesus Christ, but Jesus the Christ. Although in his days on earth, it wasn't either Jesus or the Christ. The man Jesus was Hebrew, in Aramaic, named Joshua, not Jesus. Now, if the name Jesus Christ were the name of a man who had attained mastership, certainly the name didn't attain mastership. It was the consciousness that attained mastership, and nothing but that consciousness will be the master unto you. Jesus said, if I do not go away, if I do not leave you, the Comforter, the Master, cannot come unto you. Why? Because the Master is the divine state of consciousness and one which you and I attain in some measure. Again, the degree to which we lose our hate, fear, and love of that which appears as a person, place, or thing, circumstance, or condition, in the degree that we become non-attached to the things of this world, so that ultimately, in some measure, we can say, I have overcome the world. In other words, I can use the things of the world or leave them alone. I can pick up my life or leave it down. I can enjoy good food or I can get along with a sandwich. In the degree that we learn non-attachment, in that degree do we attain the master consciousness. Now, those like Jesus Christ are a help to us. They are an inspiration. They are more than that. When we can come into the atmosphere of their individual beings or through their writings or in groups, we automatically are lifted up nearer and nearer and nearer to the actual realization and demonstration of the master consciousness. The master consciousness has appeared on earth many times through many individuals. Actually, the master consciousness has appeared on earth in millions of people, only not in the full degree that it appeared here in the person of Jesus Christ. From the effect of the man's life, there's no doubt that he must have attained it probably to the highest degree ever known. If not, there can be only one or two others who have attained such a degree of master consciousness. The rest of us can be very well satisfied if we attain enough of the master consciousness to be able to have dominion over our own individual experience and to be able to be of help to those who come within range of our thoughts. The master consciousness likewise brings itself forth in messages, in books, thereto in the degree I'm having right now wonderful experiences in hearing and receiving letters from people who just through reading Infinite Way and others of those books are witnessing to healings and improved conditions in their lives. These do not come because of the man, but because a certain state of consciousness has externalized itself in print, and those who are able to catch some measure of that are able to benefit by it. It hasn't anything to do with the man anymore than it has to do with Jesus. Jesus was that avenue who was able to say, "The Father within me doeth the work." It is the state of consciousness that came through here and put those words out on paper. I wonder if you can conceive for a minute of what happens when these ideas and thoughts come through and get themselves down on paper. How completely independent they are of a person. I would just like to tell you two little instances of this, merely in the hope that you can catch the idea of what I mean by spiritual freedom or master consciousness. One night I was in meditation for what I suppose was several hours. Later, about 3 in the morning, I was awakened and without knowing why, jumped out of bed. I picked up pen and paper and started to write. Out of it came this Nightingale of the East. It's the front piece of spiritual interpretation of scripture, and it's out on cards, motto, or greeting cards. Another time there came forth a thing that is sung as a sacred solo all over the land. The soloist at the Mother Church in Boston did it for a record that went all around the world. Its name is Truly, There Is No Night There. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Christ performs these things through me. This consciousness goes before one to make the crooked places straight. You know that there isn't a metaphysical practitioner in the world that hasn't felt that sense or presence at some time in his healing work. Probably not with every healing, but there's no doubt, and I speak from many, many years of experience and from acquaintance with hundreds of practitioners, I have never known one who had not had that transcendental experience in which they felt the click of this super consciousness, of the master consciousness of reality, in which they beheld the spiritual creation, even if only for a second. Sometimes it came as light. It came in other ways and forms, but it was a click. Spiritual freedom, then, is a freedom that comes from grace. It does not come from taking thought. It does not come through mental effort. The taking of thought and the mental effort may lift us to a place where we can realize that freedom in power. My thoughts are not your thoughts, said the Lord. So none of your thoughts give you your spiritual freedom. But right thinking may lift you to the place where the divine thought does come through. I think you're asking the question, how do you obtain this consciousness? Or how do you attain this spiritual freedom? That's the natural question after all this. I've given you an indication that one way, of course, is through contact with someone who has attained some measure of it, going to him or her, either as a practitioner or a teacher, or going to the writings which show such liberation. But there is another way, and a way that will make you independent of all this outside aid. It lies in your development of a listening attitude. If you can practice from the minute you awaken in the morning until you sleep at night, practice the listening ear, you will get there. I've been over this ground before because it is the way. It is the highest way known to attain spiritual freedom. Opening consciousness for the inflow of spirit. Now, it won't flow in on you from the outside somewhere. Rather, it will flow from within you to the without. From the great depths and great reality of your being comes this flow. That is what you come into when you close your eyes and when you open your ears, as you learn, "Speak, Father, for thy servant heareth. I will listen for thy voice." Any of the thoughts that will make you receptive to the great infinite power within your own being. So instead of living out here in bondage to the world of thoughts and ideas and propaganda, Be free. Thank you, Joe. So that's quite the lesson. And again, back to having the listening ear, having that radio station on from the minute you wake up until you go to sleep, listening for God's announcement. Maybe static most of the time, but every now and then you get an announcement. And let's hope it's not emergency, emergency. But we listen when we have to make decisions before we meet someone. If we have a question, if we have a sorrow, if we have a joy, doesn't matter. Keep listening. And I celebrate you all too, in the sense that you haven't leaned on a person other than Joel as your guide. And he's not in living form, so that allows you to have that independence. And there are answers in the work, but you still need to discern. You still need to figure out what the principles mean. What does it mean to nothingize? What does it mean to impersonalize? What does it mean to know God? What is God? These things you are doing on your own. And of course, at times we need help. That's natural. But for the most part, you are very thoughtful, very diligent, very committed students of Joel. And that is to be celebrated. And I hope that through meditating with me, meditating with the meeting group, we get ever closer and expand that consciousness further. And again, remember that, and this has come out in the uh, Dolores Cannon works. She's wonderful. She's an older woman and very, very kind and thoughtful and certainly sane. But she said, you don't have to do anything. Just being in this world as an enlightened being helps the world. So just in your daily interactions with people, your kindness, your patience, your understanding, that can be enough. You don't have to be an active practitioner or whatever else, is out there. Often it's a very unrewarding and demanding way of life. It's certainly not a way to make a living unless you, I think, push some ethical boundaries these days. So, yes, blessings to all of you for who and what you are. And let's just together acknowledge our spiritual essence, our spiritual godhood. Acknowledge that you are God appearing in this world through you. Actions large or small, through you, you are expressing God. I am that I am. I and God are one. We are one. We are one with each other. We are one with every living thing on earth. I. I am that I am.